Welcome to the Prosperity Podcast, Gem. It's great to have Gem Dentith with us. Gem is a transformational coach. She's also the founder of the Undressed Method. Gem, it's great to have you as always. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Mark.
Absolutely. Now we have to start with the Undressed Method because it's something that I think captures a lot of people's curiosity. So
hmm
while we're not going to dwell too much on that, I would love for you to just share with us what is the Undressed Method.
Thank you. Well, it came about really from my own experiences. So I've worked in business for about how many years? 20 years. And what I noticed was that many people are wearing their suits, and I'm wearing a suit now, but they wear their suit, they wear their masks. And then when I trained in yoga, it was almost like I went down this journey of unlifting the veil. Like, what else is there to really understand and know? And I realized that most people are really wearing a lot of they're not being their authentic self. Authentic leadership's not really there. They're always, living very performatively. They're wearing a mask, they're wearing their suit, they put their suits on, they become a different persona almost. So Undressed is really a process and a guide, an intimate invitation. It's almost like an intimate invitation to come back to the one beneath it all, the one beneath the suit, the authentic leader, the one that's congruent, the one that's aligned. So it's a methodology to really get familiar with what's true, familiar with your true self, and then to live and love from that place, really.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ground that I know that me and you could talk about because
I
we have
know.
very similar energy and similar beliefs, and we've had the privilege of getting to know each other quite well over these years.
Yeah.
I really wanted to touch on a couple of things that I don't think we've spoken about publicly before. One is you speak about the power of leading quietly. What
Yes.
does that quiet power mean to you, and how can we improve the way we lead?
Oh, thank you. So for me, quiet leadership or quiet power is again when you come back home to yourself. It's a difference between a leader that is very performative and very masked, or leading from presence. I think most leaders think that, or most leadership theories give you, leadership's loud, and I think for me personally, I don't think leadership needs to be loud. A soft leadership or a quiet leadership comes from an inner presence, a connection to your inner thing, whatever that is for you. I call it source. Most people live on kind of they're survival coded, and they're leading and living from that survival code base. So, and that's quite loud. Because when you're living in survival mode, obviously, then that's very competitive. You need to be the loudest in the room. It's very, very performative. It's very much control. It's very protective. Whereas when you've got that quiet leadership, it's presence, it's softer, it's felt, it's more impactful. It leaves that lingering taste, that feeling in the room after you've left. And I think it kind of pulls people towards you as well, having that more presence, but that felt presence rather than that performative power. Performative power is harder. It's got a different feeling state to it. And that quiet power it's softer. It's like a soft power, but it's felt and it leaves that lingering, nicer feeling in the room for a lot longer.
Do you think it shifts from trying to impress and maybe derive typically out of ego, then into more uh, centeredness and more from our spiritual side?
Yeah, I think ultimately that's where we're leading people back to. When I say, I mean, I don't use certain terms in business, but again, if I was being completely congruent, I would use the terms that I really meant. So to be more source led and source powered rather than survivor led and survival powered, because I think survival led, you burn out on that energy because it's not sustainable. Whereas source led, when you know yourself very congruent with yourself, it's sustained. The energy is sustained for a lot longer. So I think it depends on which code base the leader is running from and
Hmm.
which source of energy supply that leader is running from. Essentially, you've got a choice to lean into either. And my method, my advisory with my work leads people from survival to source powered. Um, yeah.
Let's go a little deeper on that then. So, in a world where noise and performance are really recognized, how can then people start to align with authenticity and congruency?
Well, that's the inner game. So I think the outer game is almost like understanding what the world wants from you, how to operate within certain dynamics, how to operate within certain environments, what's expected of you in your role. And that still stands. But then the missing half is the inner game. So it's almost like just because you're source led or source powered, or you have the inner game, or you understand yourself from that second basis, from the inside out, you're not any less performative. You are, but it's a different kind of power. So you probably end up performing more. Your impact is probably greater. Your influence is by far greater, but it's a different kind of feeling. It's a different kind of power. So it's not a you don't leaders who are more congruent, more whole, they have both sides connected. So they're very performative. They know their role. They know the metrics they need to hit, the KPIs, what's expected of them within that role, within that workplace. However, they're also very aligned within themselves, very anchored within themselves. They know themselves deeply at that fundamental level, and that's the difference. Most people, when especially leaders, they get disconnected from their inner self. So they need to know their inner self to be able to perform as their outer self, and then they're more congruent and more aligned.
Mm.
That's
So
my opinion.
yeah. We're emphasizing the importance of this in a game. What
Yeah.
does actually finding connection internally actually look like in practice?
Yeah. I mean, there's many, many, many paths, right? But when I was in the home office and that change management transformation program, my outer game was done. I thought I knew how to perform. I thought I knew how to run a transformation program. The strategy was all there. I kept looking at all of the words on the page, all of the strategy documents again. What am I missing? What am I missing? Looking around at the politicians, looking around at my leadership team, they're all fighting, and looking at my change people and looking at my end users. And again, they were burning out. I'm like, I'm not seeing something. So the inner game really is understanding not only just how your mind works and how your emotional side and the resilience, but it's beyond that. It's kind of what's the source of resilience? What's the source of confidence? What's the source of impact? What's the source of power? It's understanding your human nature. It goes quite deep. So you can go on many, many different courses and learn many different modalities, whether it's kind of like breath work or go CBT and understand neuroscience or social cognitive neuroscience. However, it all fundamentally comes back from to principles. What is the principle of a human experience? Get there, understand that, truly felt, known, not intellectually, but embodied. Then the world becomes your oyster. That's when the magic happens, right?
Yeah, and why do you think people dodge the inner work? Like, and what shifts do they need to take to not hide? Because I think sometimes people just they they get busy to try and avoid what's within. Why do you think that people are doing that?
It's not obvious. It's not obvious. We're not taught it. It's not something that we learn from a young age. Unless you're born to parents who are psychologists or spiritual gurus or have any insight themselves in terms of how their inner work works and what really truly is education, then you don't learn it from a young age. From a young age, you're conditioned to keep pushing through it. And also, there's still a stigma about the inner game. There's still a stigma that to understand, what are your kind of core beliefs? What are your core values? Unless you've got an executive coach at a certain level of leadership, unless you've been exposed to that and you've gone down the executive coaching route, that's when the inner game work begins. Or if you're somebody who hasn't had a coach, but you've had something happen in life, such as, I don't know, an illness or something that's a mate or psychological or a physical illness or an event that's happened in your life that's made you question things, then you start to look and you become a seeker and then you go down the spiritual path. So there are many different paths. The issue is no one's really helping on people. It's not a fundamental education that, brush your teeth 3 times a day if you want to have clean teeth. No one says if you want to go to work and be a congruent leader or have greater impact and success, this is the inner game. These are the inner rules that you need to understand prior to going out there and layering on the outer game and the outer rules. It's not taught. Simple as that. It's just not taught.
Mhm. From the outside looking in, and somebody who knows you relatively well, Gem, I can see like there's three words that I really associate with you. One is grounded, one is conscious, and the other is consistent. You're very consistent. You always seem to be very assured. So I think even when there's chaos around you, how have you personally managed to stay conscious and grounded as a leader while also having the ability to guide other people through their own growth?
Yeah, great questions. I think. again, it's been the inner game. I've really after my first 30 years of understanding the outer game of the world, the next how many 13 years was the inner game. And now I think once you then, that's when you're really an adult. That's when you become a mature leader, once you've actually gone through those two life lessons, and you kind of stitch them both together. But I think for me, because I can understand and feel and see what's going on at any one time within someone that I'm working with or within the organization, I can see the layers of reality or the layers of what's happening in front of me. The understanding, when you look at a computer, you understand how a computer works. It's got a screen, it's got code, it's got, it needs someone to input things in there. So once you understand the mechanics of a human, and every human is fundamentally the same at the principle level, that gives you a level of knowing how to adapt and how to treat and how to be with certain environments. So that situational awareness, that situational tact, that resilience, it all comes back to kind of your inner knowing and your inner reality and your kind of the inner sense that you have. But you can only have that by going through the process of really understanding again, I keep going back to it, the human experience fundamentally in this conversation right now, what's going on so that we are having this experience, this exchange between us. What's happening within your system, what's happening within my system. So you have to understand your own system before you start to understand business systems and, economics and things like that. Everything's a system. And I think until we understand our own, we can never really know the part we play within the wider environment.
Yeah, one common strand between us, especially in terms of the work we do, is it starts with you. It all
Everything.
derives from that relationship with self, right?
hmm Yeah, it's that relationship with self. I don't mean it. I don't mean it in a real self-indulgent way. It's just if you want to be a better driver, understand how to drive the vehicle. If you want to perform at a higher level, understand how you, as a human machine, part human machine, understand how your machine could be to understand the way it operates in order for it to attune it to what you need it to do.
Mm.
And I think that's all it is. So it's almost like taking the emotion out of who we are almost and understanding. So what is it is expected of me today, this week, this month? How do I need to attune this system in order to meet those requirements? Um, and that's it. It's really not very complicated. But the issue is when you are so ingrained within the survival self, often you're then so ingrained within the survival habits and then it's really hard to break a habit because you are then identifying with that habit personality. And then you've got to pick into and ask yourself why those habits exist in the first place. And that's often for many, many reasons, but often is because of numbing or there's many reasons. Let's not go down that kind of trail of thought. But again, that's part of the inner work to unpick self, to identify where you are in terms of are you more survival based? Are you more source aligned? And on that pendulum, that's kind of where you get the data from,
Mm.
and that's where the work starts. And that's where I work with my clients as well to understand where they are on that kind of on that line.
Mm. And then if someone's listening or watching to this with you and I, and they were to take one simple step,
hmm
towards being more authentic or finding that inner connection or really understanding the inner game, what
hmm
would that look like? What would that be?
I think the first step that most people go, and I think the first step would be to stop, actually, which is maybe in reverse of what you're saying, like step means go forward, but actually the first step would be to stop, yeah,
So
and to
you feel
pause.
like you're eavesdropping on my last podcast that I was doing because I actually said to the guy, sometimes we have to stop to get ahead.
Completely, yeah, to pause. I'd say have a pause. It's what you do with that pause, though, that's important, right?
Yeah, so what would that look like? Would that be like taking the day off or taking a week off, having a soul sabbatical, or would it be simply just an evening with pen and paper and journal? What would you encourage most?
Could be any of the above, right? Because it just depends on what comes through, like, what situation that person's in. But often I find because a leader is operating at such a high capacity and so many things that are, so many distractions in their mind, so many expectations that are asked of them, they need to stop and pause to allow what I always say the snow globe to settle, allow the dust to settle, because eventually in themselves, once the mind settled enough, however you do that, whether it's walking, whether it's journaling. Journaling's great to kind of gets it on the page, but just don't read it. Walking's great because it kind of clears the mind. In nature's amazing, right? But it doesn't matter how you get to that point. But when you stop and allow the mind, whatever activity works for you, allow the mind to settle enough, then the inner being will rise naturally, because that's what it does. And then they'll know often what the next step is for them. Whether or not they take that next step is a different question, right? And
Yeah.
that's where we would come in if we were a coach to help them on that journey if they had to integrate something new. But they were people, leaders often have the insight themselves. They know, they just don't. That voice that voice that tells them that what the next step is often very quiet,
Mm.
and they don't trust it because intuition often is a very quiet voice, like quiet leadership. So it's a case of them starting to trust that within them and taking those micro steps, whatever in whatever direction comes through. But pause and allow the mind to settle is the first two steps, I would say.
And if people want more of you and your work and the way that you do things and maybe a little more depth, going a little further on what we've kind of just touched on, where do people go, Jem, for that?
So I would say, depending on if it's an organization or whether it's a leader, so I offer advisory consultancy through my website, gemdentithglobal.com. Obviously, reach out to me, contact me, email me. All the details are on the website. The book should be coming out hopefully soon. It's in its manuscript stage at the moment, working with an editor to see if it's one book or three, which is exciting. Because I've written so many words, I've been documenting the human experience for so long. We just decided whether it's one big life Bible or whether it's divided into three. But the first book, if it's three, will be out at Christmas time. So yeah, watch out for that, and hopefully that will give some of the insight as to where we're pointing to on this call.
A great stocking filler.
Yeah, great stocking filler. Yeah,
Thanks,
you're
Jem.
very welcome. Thank you.